A war of words has erupted between the Prime Minister and Premiers over vaccine mandates and pandemic powers. But Scott Morrison is not taking a backward step, declaring it's time for governments to get out of people's lives.
Back together 9 months after their first meeting, Scott Morrison and 85-year-old Jane Malashuk reunite for their COVID booster shot.
Lovely to see you.
Yes. Rolling up their sleeves to encourage other Australians to do the same.
Well, we have to go and do the recovery now.
The Prime Minister hopes the rollout of the vaccine booster and Australia's 85% vaccination rate is the start of the end for restrictions, even in states where the rollout still lags behind.
They should be able to go and get a cup of coffee in Brisbane when you're over 80%, regardless of whether you've had the vaccines or not.
Calling out Queensland's vaccine mandate, despite the requirement for vaccine passports in other states, for international travel, and even at the Prime Minister's own events.
The Prime Minister requires journalists to be vaccinated to attend his press conferences. Why should a barista in Brisbane be less safe at work than the Prime Minister?
The Prime Minister has stated a perfectly reasonable position. You cannot segregate even a small part of Australian society.
After months of states calling the shots, the Prime Minister wants to turn the tables.
There comes a time where government has to step back. It's now time for them to be able to step forward with their lives and for governments to step back out of their lives. States
believe it's the Prime Minister, though, that needs to step up, calling on him to forcefully condemn violent protests, which have played out on the streets of Melbourne and Perth this week.
Well, it'll be a lot better when he stops double-speaking to extremists.
We can't have some people breaking ranks to try and win some political points amongst some people.
I couldn't have been clearer about denunciating the violence and the threats and the intimidation.
The war of words centres around claims Scott Morrison has tried to pander to fringe elements.
I don't have sympathy for violence. I don't have sympathy for intimidation. I have sympathy for Australians who've had a gutful of governments telling them what to do over the last 2 years.
Scott Morrison wants to tap into that frustration, road testing his rhetoric during a campaign blitz this week. But when he returns here to Canberra next week, he's facing another fight on vaccines, and it's one that threatens to derail the government's agenda. Two coalition senators, Alex Antic and Gerard Rennick, are threatening to withhold their vote unless the unvaccinated are provided protection from mandates. One Nation is also threatening to vote against all government legislation.
Governments have to start letting go.
And as Parliament prepares to return for the final sitting fortnight of the year, every vote will count. The government hoping to tick off on leftover legislation promises from the last election before the next. Trudy McIntosh, Sky News, Canberra.